COVID pandemic. So a time when a lot of folks were definitely trying to figure out, you know, how do we get a hold of some of this stuff? How do we build for ourselves in this moment where everything seems to be falling apart? And so we're back in, let's just say, a similar moment. And also, this book has been out for 10 years. So we're also here to celebrate the 10th anniversary of this book. And so that's part of the reason why uh, uh, Dr. Gordon Nembhard has joined us today because the tenth edition contains a special preface that sort of talks about what it means for this book to have been out for 10 years, and Professor Nembhard is going to answer some questions about that and talk about that with us, and that's how we're going to start off this series that we'll be embarking in over the course of the next few weeks and months. So. Uh, I'm going to end this rambling now so that we can get started with our check in. For anybody who is watching the live stream or new to the space, I think I see one name that I don't recognize. The check in is just something that we do to make sure in our community to make sure that we're, staying people centered, that we are maintaining an awareness of where everybody's at, what everybody needs, and just, doing the human to human relationship part of community building and relationship building. So, what that typically looks like is everybody will go around the room and give their number and color that are both supposed to kind of represent, how you're feeling at that moment on that day. Whatever scale you want, doesn't have to be 1 to 10, whatever color you want. And then we'll do like sort of like an icebreaker question as well. Um, Typically, we go with a question that has something to do with the topic. So maybe let's do like what's the last cooperative endeavor that you were involved in? Yeah. Or maybe not the last, but a notable cooperative endeavor that you were involved in, something that you did in collaboration, and, you know, with other people. Who wants to start us off?
That's cool. I did it. Ever. I was involved in. Um,
Yeah, Miss Deidre, go for it.
I'm just tripping off. Okay. I was just tripping off of what was the last cooperative endeavor I was involved in. Okay, first off, I'm a mustard 907. And maybe the last cooperative endeavor I was involved in is Walk It Out. It's a nutrition and walking group that I'm a part of, that I've been in for the last year. And I did a bucket list thing. I was able to do the mini marathon in May. And so that was big for me at 67 to check off a box. And most of the people in the group are seniors. So, yeah, that was it. Walk it out. Walk it out, America.
Sweet. Pass it to the next person.
Okay, I pass it to Collie. Collie.
Uh, 7. I'm a 7, 9, and I mean, I helped my friends in a group project.
Yeah, pass it to the next person. You pass it to me alrighty. What's up, y'all? I'm feeling like a traffic light green 8 right now. I'm feeling pretty good. And of course, I'm gonna shout out the work that I do all day, every day with the Kheprw Institute. Yeah, we are a nonprofit on paper, but certainly a cooperative culturally and spiritually. And so everything I do with that group, with this group, is in collaboration and cooperation with other folks. And I will pass it to my good friend Charles over here, tucked off camera.
Thank you, Jero. Hi, everyone. My name is Charles Hammond, and I am a 3.14 today in honor of this strawberry rhubarb pie that I I got, and it has changed my life for the past 24 hours. So it was wonderful. So pi is my number, and it's I'm really in a good mood, so it doesn't represent low on the 1 to 10 scale. And my color is it's purple. And my co-op experience is my is on Sunday I played in a soccer game, and I like to give a twist to convention. And so I'm bringing in sports as a cooperative activity. It's normally competitive, and soccer especially is very competitive, but my game that I play, it's called Butler Family Soccer, all ages, all abilities, mostly very high abilities, not not including my own. And we don't keep score. We play for our personal best. We play to help our teammates as much as possible. We even congratulate the other team. So there's some cooperative sports, and I will pass it to Andrea or Andrea, whichever you prefer.
Hi. It I'm Andrea Price, and I will say I'm a red 9 today. And the cooperative experience that comes to mind is doing some collaborative research around the community and trying to of one of the largest slaveholders in Mississippi and attempting to find the descendants. And I can only see who's on Zoom. So is it Jru?
Yeah, hello. And thank you for pronouncing my name right. I appreciate that. Doesn't always happen.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
let's see. So I'm feeling like a.
Essence Robinson.
I'm also gonna go with a pie. We're getting a call, so I'll try to go quickly. So okay, beautiful. Never mind. We're putting it on mute. Hold on. Okay, we're back. Yeah. So I'm feeling like a red, black, and green today. I'm feeling like I'm gonna steal Charles's pie. Feeling that infinity type number right now. Really excited to have Dr. Gordon Nembhard back in the space with us. And I think the last cooperative project I worked on is we are looking to renovate a kitchen and turn it into a bathroom. So me and some of the other young people on the Kheprw campus got together to move a bunch of appliances. And boy, it was
Woo!
hard work, but many hands make light work. So that was the last cooperative project we worked on together. And I'll pass the demo to.
So I'm here with Jru in the background. My color today, it's a beautiful day here, so I'm going to go with Miss Ferris, regular sunshine yellow. Uh, my number today is going to be 11 in the spirit of intuition. And co-op, I'm going to mention two. As I was sitting there reflecting on the question, about 40 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, a little less, I was involved in the Ujamaa Community Food Co-op. And ended up after a year or two involvement, ended up becoming the executive director. And let's just say that experience really put my boots on as related to leadership development, but also doing leadership in a very cooperative, collaborative kind of way. And also a traditional model, with the 501c3 approaches and the board and all of that was my first experience of something like that. And it actually was extremely transforming uh, experience in my journey and cooperative approaches to working in community. More recently, I was involved with the Kheprw Integrated Fund Initiative, which is the fund that provided low interest, no interest loans to some Black and Brown entrepreneurs in our community, up to $15,000 in loans, along with TA. And one of those TA experiences where we decided to sponsor 4 co-ops in the Cincy co-op training that lasted 14 weeks. And out of that particular initiative, we're now looking at the Kheprw Integrated Fund also has decided that its next funding it plans to involve will also include 1 or 2 additional co-op experiences for funding in TA as we continue to try to make the theory to practice thing more meaningful in our local community. That's what I'll say about my co-op experience for this call. Jay, we'll pass it back to Sam.
You got it. Let's pass it to Stefan.
Hello. Uh, Someone catch me up to speed. I think I'm a little behind on what
Yeah,
you're
we're
sharing.
doing check-ins right now. If today were a color, what color would it be? If today were a number, what number would it be? And then what's one cooperative project you've been working on recently?
Okay. Today I'd say I'm probably pretty orange. I'd have to go with the number 2. And most recently, cooperative work I'm doing was putting together Saturdays at the farm with the Soul Food Project. So we have one of those coming up this Saturday. So I've been busy working with that.
Wonderful. And Stefan and was it Andrea? Am I pronouncing that right?
Andrea?
Andrea? Okay, Andrea. Stefan and Andrea, just because I don't recognize y'all's names, is this the first time that y'all have joined us for Mumbo Jumbo or for a Kheprw event?
No, but this is the first in quite a while for me, though.
Okay. Word. Word. How about you, Andrea?
I don't, it might be my first for Mumbo Jumbo, but I have joined you for an event before.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, can I ask can I ask um uh I would love to hear a little bit about both of you, just so that we can know each other better. And then as well a little bit about what made you decide to come and join today if it's been a while. Let's start with Andrea since you're already off mute.
Okay. I've known Imhotep for 30 years. Is that how far it goes back? When we were in a study group together. And
Ah,
I've been a, periodic supporter of the organization. And I happened to catch this in my inbox, which sometimes fills up a lot. And it's something that's been on my mind, the topic, so I decided to join.
Hey, Andrea, I thought that was you there. How you been?
I'm fine, and you?
Doing all right. Chinyelu, Andrea is somebody you really might want to grab up and get back on for a deeper dive of her personal story. She's definitely got a great community wealth building personal story of things she's done over those years.
is that the same study group that you were in with my granddad?
Yep.
Nice.
Who's
Very
your
cool.
granddad?
Musa and Africa.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. We'll have to talk some more about that. And yeah, Stefan, same question for you.
Yeah. So I've been in and out involved with Kheprw for a couple years, but now that I've sort of switched careers, my schedule and my free time has sort of cleared up. When this came across my inbox, thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to jump back in. So yeah, I went from spending several years as a classroom teacher to now working on an urban farm. Still working with kids, but got a lot more freedom and a lot more time
Yeah.
now on my hands.
Can I ask what made you switch?
Several reasons. I mean, the main one, burnt out, and then secondly, my health. Uh, Being
Awesome.
outside of the classroom it's just been a lot better for me overall.
Yeah. Wonderful. Sweet. Well, yeah. And then I think Jessica, did you check in? Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well then I'm gonna give it to Naz, who's in here in the room with us, and then Jessica, you can finish us off.
Nas here on tech. Feeling like my usual 9.5 purple. And cooperative project I've worked on. I actually host events out in Cincinnati with a couple friends, and we do a music. We're in a music niche at the moment, but we like to find people that are already out here doing good work and try to like platform in some way, find a way to help them, help us, help each other, build community. And yeah, I'm excited to learn a lot today about the cooperative model I might have been using and didn't even realize I was using it. But I'll pass it back to Jessica.
Yeah. Thank you. So there've been a couple of nines and a 9.5. I'm a 9 because I feel like I'm close to really great, but maybe not quite at great. And I'm a purple too. I think there were a couple purples. For me, purple is very grounding and rooting, and I also feel like I'm back with friends. So those are my colors. And I guess the cooperative effort I want to talk about is I was part of the group that started the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives 21 years ago. Um, I was working with groups to do regional worker co-op and workplace democracy meetups and conferences, and we realized that the U.S. was the only developed country that didn't have a national federation of worker co-ops, and we were trying to promote and advocate for more worker co-ops, especially in the US. So we had a strategy to start by making sure there were regional meetups and local co-op associations. And so we helped build up a bunch of small local associations in New York City, Boston, the Amherst area of Massachusetts, New Orleans. Some other groups started in Madison. There was already a local group in the Northwest and in the Bay Area in California. And so we started to get everybody together in regional conferences. And I'm one of the first founders of the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy. And then the regional conferences finally in 2004 had a national conference in Madison, Wisconsin, where we brought everyone together and agreed that we should start a U.S. federation. So I guess I'll still celebrate the 20 years of having that in existence in the U.S., putting us on the map and having a lot more worker co-ops getting developed throughout the country.
Right on. Thank you very much, Jessica. Yeah, and thank you to everybody else for checking in, especially Andrea and Stefan, who are joining us for the first time in a while. We may have some more folks join us in the Zoom or here in the physical space as the conversation goes on. And if we do, we'll just wait for the natural pauses in the conversation to let them do their check-ins as well. But for now, I would love to go ahead and get started with the discussion a little bit. And I think. The way here's the layout that I'm thinking. Anyone feel free to offer any other suggestions, but I think I would like to start maybe by just giving Dr. Nembhard a little opportunity to share a little bit about herself and her how she came uh, to this work of cooperatives. I think you just shared about that a little bit, and then maybe as well a little bit about how collective courage came into being 10 years ago. And then maybe we can start some more specific discussion on the preface. And I've got a few questions for that as well. But yeah, if that's good with you, I'll let you start it off.
That's fine. Yeah, so I'm Jessica Gordon Nembhard, and let's see, I got interested in cooperatives in the mid 1990s because I actually had a job as economic development analyst for the Black Community Crusade for Children, which was an initiative of the Children's Defense Fund in Washington, D.C. And I was tasked with trying to figure out community-friendly strategies, Black family and child-friendly community level strategies to help support the kind of national policy advocacy that the Children's Defense Fund was doing for children. And so I started looking into community-based economic development strategies, what community-controlled economic development looks like. Sorry, that's my daughter's dogs. Hopefully they're not bothering you. Oh, maybe you can't hear it.
We're all good. Yeah.
So as I started studying sort of community controlled economic development and that kind of thing, I obviously ran into co-ops. The funny thing is that I actually grew up in a cooperative intentional community. I had used food co-ops in my lifetime before this, but I'd never really thought about co-ops as a business model for community development. And I never thought of co-ops as an economic strategy to kind of eliminate capitalism. But as I started studying it now, looking at it as a strategy for community-based economic development, I started seeing it in a much bigger light in terms of how to do interlocking co-ops, right? So housing co-ops with food co-ops, with other retail co-ops, with credit unions, co-op farming, co-op housing, right? And how to see, and then all kinds of worker co-ops. So I started learning about them, got really excited about them, especially as a strategy for Black folks, started going to a lot of co-op conferences, got trained in cooperative economics, and realized that the spaces where I was trying to learn more and talk more about co-ops, there weren't a lot of Black people in those spaces. Most of the co-op conferences I went to, the co-op trainings I went to, I was either the only Black person or one of two or three, and they never talked about Black-owned co-ops. It was all about co-ops from Europe and co-ops that European Americans were in. And I kept asking where are the Black folks, and I didn't get really very good answers. I did finally find the Federation of Southern Cooperatives in the South, in Alabama and Atlanta, and found out there was a group of Black farmers who had started co-ops and had started a regional federation, the Southern Federation. But aside from that, there really wasn't much history, and I was really interested in co-ops as an urban development strategy, and there wasn't a lot of Black folks in those spaces. So I started talking to people who knew about co-ops. I had a friend who had studied W.E.B. Du Bois's economic thought, which is actually about co-ops. And so he said to me, oh, you've got to read this, this, and this about Du Bois. And that really got me realizing that Black folks have had co-ops, have talked about it, have seen it as a strategy. And so from there, I just kept looking both for examples of African-American cooperatives through history and African-American leaders and other people who have either started co-ops or promoted co-ops or talked about using co-ops as a strategy, and found that we actually had this huge, long, continuous history of using both mutual aid, economic cooperation, and formal co-op business ownership. So I actually started the research in the late 1990s. I started doing presentations about it by 1998, 1999, writing short articles and things like that. But the research was really slow going. I was also in the middle of my career. I had just moved from the nonprofit world into the academic world. So I was heavily in trying to do an academic career. I was a single mother raising two children. So it took me about 15 years to get the book done, or to get it in the shape where I felt like it was done. I actually never felt like it was done. Um, but yeah, so I was just thinking the other day what that means. It's about, I've been writing that book and talking about this stuff for like 25 years now. It's not just the 10 years that the book has been published. But the idea was that, one, I passionately believe that cooperative ownership and solidarity economics are the kind of economics that all of humanity should be doing, but especially people with multiple exploitations and oppressions, that it's the only way that we're going to save ourselves in a way that keeps our humanity. And so I'm very interested in making sure that we understand that it is a strategy that is not like external to Black communities. It's not just a European strategy. In fact, right, the first cooperatives were the first ways that human beings engaged in economics. And we know that the first human beings in this world were from Africa. So cooperatives actually started in Africa. Economic cooperation started in Africa. So it's not alien to us at all. Yet when I first started talking to Black communities about starting co-ops, I was told, oh, Black people don't do that. That's white folks do that. Or hippies have food co-ops, but Black people don't have co-ops, until I started giving examples and explaining what I meant by economic cooperation and mutual aid and co-ops. And then people started to resonate and realize that, yes, we do have this legacy. And yes, in some ways, I think you already said it. I forget the young man who was just before me, but he already said it. In some ways, we do economic cooperation all the time. We're always cooperating because that's what human beings do. But we've been alienated from it in this modern world that we're in. Is that a good enough introduction? Ooh,
Are you
have I
still with
frozen?
us?
Oh,
Yeah. Okay.
sorry, I
You
must
bet.
have froze. What is the last thing you hear? What's the last thing you heard?
I heard you finished you were asking if that was a good answer, and I said that was a fantastic answer. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I missed the part that you answered me, but now I heard it. Thank you.
Yeah. No worry. Yeah, all good. So, I was also just gonna ask, could you share a little bit more about, you mentioned growing up, in a cooperative community. You mentioned, the ways that, we participate in cooperatives, and often don't notice it. I feel like that's very, in line with my own experience as well. So, could you talk a little bit about, how that cooperative culture in the community that you grew up in manifested?
Right. Well, my parents chose to move to a place called Skyview Acres, outside New York City. They were living in Harlem. Actually, they were in a co-op housing in Harlem, but I only learned that like 5 years ago when I was going through some of their old files, and I found their old co-op membership card or something to the co-op housing they lived in. So my parents were doing co-ops from before I was born in the 50s, but I didn't know it. But they decided to join this intentional cooperative community out in the suburbs, because they wanted to be outside of the city. My mother actually had grown up more in the country and was missing more fresh air and trees and stuff. But they also wanted to be they're activist scholars. They wanted to be in a community that they would be happy to have their children connected to the neighbors. So the community was actually an intentional community made by people who were anti-war, pro racial integration. Uh, they were a women's rights group, anti-nuke, not just anti-war, but anti-nuke, interracial and interdenominational. And so my parents felt like it would be a great place to raise children with like-minded people. And so I did actually know that we were called the co-op, but I just thought it meant we were collectively living in that space and the group collectively owned some land, like there was a pond for swimming and a ball field for playing baseball and soccer and stuff. So to me, that's all it meant. It just meant like collective living and that a bunch of people all engaged in community life together and owned land together. I didn't think of co-op business ownership, even though, as I said, later in life, in my teens and in college, I actually bought food from food co-ops and books from book co-ops and stuff. But I just hadn't. I guess I kind of took it for granted, but didn't think of it as a real strategic move that communities of people could deliberately do to take more control over what was happening in their communities and that kind of thing until later in life. So that's what I meant. But if you want to know more about living in Skyview Acres, I mean, it was fun. We knew everybody. There were 44 families. We knew everybody. We were comfortable going to anybody's house, walking into anybody's house. We did summer programs together. Like I never went to camp because there were always stuff going on in my community, right? That we had swimming lessons at the pond. There was uh, games, softball, football, soccer games on the fields in our yards. We played what's it called, flashlight tag. Anyway, so it was a very comfortable. And you know, this is during the 60s I grew up, so very activist time. And even though the neighbors around the rest of our where we lived, not our immediate neighbors in the co-op, but the other neighbors were a little bit more conservative, and sometimes um, we got into fights and stuff on the bus because we were considered the hippie liberal whatever group, and the other people didn't appreciate it, but at least we had each other. And when we tried to do things to change things in the schools, we had each other. So when we changed the dress code so girls could wear pants, we had a whole built-in group of allies, including our parents and all my neighbors who were there. We were there staging, right? When we did anti-war stuff, we were also, our families were against the oh, what was it called? And it wasn't just a fire drill. You used to have to drill for a nuclear attack or a bombing or whatever. And anyway, our families weren't allowed because we were anti-nuke. We weren't allowed to participate in the air raid drills. That's what they were, because our parents believed that it made people think they could survive a bombing, and you really don't survive a nuclear bomb. So we had a bunch of us who were all from the families that didn't believe in this, who had to sit in the principal's office while the rest of the school was doing air raids. So it was very nice to have that camaraderie, both political and social and sort of cultural camaraderie, and to grow up, you know, in a little bit of a bubble, you know, so that by the time I went to college, I was kind of disappointed that the rest of the world wasn't like
I know that's right.
community I grew up in, but at least I had that base, right? And that
Yeah.
comfort level that it was okay to be both different, but also to stand up for rights and for what was right and to argue for the right things, because it had always been safe in my community to do that, to be like that.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, like I said, I think that there's a lot about that, you know, they say like fish can't see the water that they swim in, and I definitely think there's something about it where like when you grow up in it, it really does just feel so normal that like until you go out, you don't really realize, oh wait, we were doing something very different the whole time. Yeah. So last sort of off the cuff question before we get to the stuff that we had planned. But you mentioned feeling never having felt like the book was finished, and we're here to talk about this preface, to kick off this book study. So I was wondering if you could maybe like, maybe like start us off a little bit by talking about like, what your thoughts were as you were writing the preface, and then maybe also talk a little bit about like what you feel like the book is incomplete about the book.
So I was really excited when my publisher said, they were ready to do a second edition because the book was still selling so well. And that was about 2 years ago. So it wasn't 10th anniversary yet. It wasn't 10 years yet. I was excited for a bunch of reasons. One, I tell people that I really didn't expect the book to sell at all, right? I mean, I really thought my parents would read it and a couple other people, and then my colleagues, because I did use it to get tenure at my job, right?
Woo!
But I didn't think that anybody else would read it. So I've been shocked the whole time. And also, I don't know if I told this story before to this group, but also when the book was first coming out, it's a small academic press, Penn State University Press. So they were publishing, I think it was like 500 hard copies. And the book was a little, I thought was too expensive, right? Hoping that maybe other people would read it. But so I was complaining to them that it was too expensive and couldn't they produce a paperback that would be cheaper? And they said, oh, sorry, sorry, sorry. We can't produce the paperback until about a year after we produce the hard, the first hard copies, because we really have to sell out the first 500 before we're comfortable going into paperback. So I was like, oh, a year, this is ridiculous. The book's going to be out. No one's going to be able to afford to buy it if they want to buy it. So while I'm grumbling about this, the first month goes by and I get a notice, an apology that they can't give me my 10 complimentary books because they sold out. And not only do they sell out in a month, because they sold out the 500, they could then go into the paperback. So within a month, so they came out in May. By June, sometime in June, they actually had the paperback and had to reprint the hardback covers. So
Wow.
that was exciting, right? And then 8 years later, they're telling me, oh, this book is still selling enough. We're going to redo it. And I said, oh, it's going to be 10 years soon. And my editor said, oh, she said, that's right. I forgot. For some reason, she had 2015 in her mind or something, but it came out in 2014. So she was like, that's even better. We can do a 10th anniversary reprint. She said, we don't have enough money for you to update it. And I actually didn't have time to update it. She said, but we can give you, 12 pages to do a preface. So I said, great. So then I was thinking, okay, what do I want to say in the preface? Again, I didn't have time or energy to update everything and correct everything. So I wanted more to reflect, which I think you see if you read it, reflect on what happened in the last 10 years, which was a huge amount. I mean, all kinds of different things have come out, more and more Black groups doing co-op development. The Cooperative Hall of Fame now has a unsung hero section to honor. And so far they've been honoring Black women cooperators from my book from the past who were dead or missed out when the Hall of Fame started giving out their honors in the Hall of Fame. So that's changed. A lot of huge numbers of book clubs and all kinds of things. So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the egregious things I left out, like not talking about enough about Father McKnight and what he did in Louisiana and the South in the 60s and 70s. And also I had missed all the co-op development that happened in Washington, D.C. Luckily, another scholar had done that work. So I wanted to update that. And then I realized while I was writing it that a couple more things were happening. The Morehouse social justice debates were using my book to have a year-long social justice debate about worker co-ops, which was really cool. And there was also, the more I started talking by COVID time, it was clear that we were actually in another upsurge of Black folks doing co-ops. And in the book, I talk about three prolific periods, the 1880s, 1930s and 40s, and the 1960s and 70s as the three most prolific periods for Black co-ops. But I realized the 2020s were becoming a fourth period. So one of my colleagues at Cooperation Dayton said, oh, does that mean we're in a fourth wave? And I was like, yeah, I guess that's what it means. So then I realized I could, that's how I could end the preface by talking about that we're now on this fourth wave. So not only has the book made a difference in terms of people are reading it and interested in it and doing more things around it, but we also actually have this surge right now in Black co-op development, Black co-op organizations, and actually the number of Black co-ops, especially food co-ops and worker co-ops, has been increasing during this period. So those were the things I wanted to kind of reflect on. I also got a little spiritual. I was reading a book about Native American wisdom and came across the Lakota Wheel of Courage. And an essay that I read was talking about how the most important, what's the quote? I had it right here. Oh, the highest expression of courage is generosity. And that just really hit something in me because I thought, I named the book Collective Courage mostly to honor a statement from Ella Jo Baker, who had been the executive director of the Young Negroes Cooperative League in the 1930s, but is much better known as the advisor to SNCC and a civil rights organizer and grassroots leadership development person from the 50s and 60s. But back in the 30s, she was talking and helping people to start co-ops and do co-ops. And in one of her newsletters to the Young Negroes Cooperative League, she said, it really takes courage to do this because it's not in the mainstream, right? We're doing something against the mainstream. We're already Black folks against the mainstream, and now we're trying to do economics against the mainstream. So take heart. Everything's not going to just happen easily. It's gonna take courage. So I thought, okay, collective courage was a good way to kind of summarize this history that I've been able to lay out. But then when I read this, that generosity is the highest expression of courage, I was like, so then also this book is about collective generosity because doing cooperation, doing mutual aid, reciprocity, solidarity, economics, helping each other, it helps ourselves, but we're also being generous, right? Instead of being greedy and selfish, which is what most people think economics is about, right? How greedy, selfish people do something to make something more for themselves. But right, economic cooperation and solidarity is about how people solve problems together with other people so that everybody can prosper. And that's generosity.
Excellent. Yeah. Man, we're just off to a great start. Thank you so much for sharing and giving us that extra insight. Um, as I said, that was my last off the cuff question. So from here on, we'll be going into. I've got 5 questions that I sort of wrote out, mainly for the room, but Jessica, would love to hear you answer first for all of these, and then we can open it up to discuss a little bit for this last
We also
hour.
have
That
two more people on Zoom. Do you
yeah.
want to hear from them before we get into
Yes.
that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Stacy Davis and Flowers would love to have you guys check in. And then I've got but I did want to say beforehand, if you haven't had a chance to grab a 10th anniversary edition copy of Collective Courage yet, Kheprw's actually ordering a whole bunch that we'll be reselling to folks in the community. So if you're interested in getting that 10th anniversary edition copy, be on the lookout for that. I'll also mention that if you want to read the preface, if you join Alchemy Plus at alchemy.kheprw.org, I think, is going to put the link to alchemy.kheprw.org in the Zoom chat right now. You can read the preface on there. That's our online virtual platform for community networking and virtual community building that we're developing. And since we're at the halfway point of the show, I'm also going to drop donate.kheprw.org again. If you've been enjoying the conversation so far, if you've been enjoying this fantastic guest that we have, and just hearing some of her wisdom and experience, go to donate.kheprw.org and make a donation so that we can keep this good work going. And then, yeah, I'm going to pass it to Flowers to do the check in. We're doing number color, and then what was the last cooperative endeavor that you were involved in?
Hi guys, my name is Elita Flowers. I am glad to be here. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing your story. It's very inspiring. Favorite number? I don't know. I never thought about that one. Favorite color? I cannot pick. I love them all. And then last co-op I was a part of. I haven't been a part of official co-op. Last kind of group I was a part of was the neighborhood food champions, where it was a group of people who wanted to see a change with the food in their neighborhood. So I really did learn a lot. And that was with the CWUW and the Centers for Wellness for Urban Women, and then also with the city of Indianapolis. So it just inspired me to get involved with the community more, especially with food, changing lives with food being outdoors, and having while I change and improve my life, I want to like bring as many neighbors as I can along with me. So your story is really inspiring, Jessica. So thank you.
And you said your first name is Alina?
Elita with like a ta at the end, like Elita.
Elita,
Yes.
nice to meet you. Is this your first time coming to a Mumbo Jumbo?
Yes, this is my first time and I'm having a blast. So thank you guys for hosting this. Thank you guys for what you do.
Can I ask how you found out about us and what made you decide to join today?
Yeah, it's actually with probably the Centers of Wellness for Urban Women. They do a monthly newsletter. I'm pretty sure that's where it came from. Jair there, she's amazing. So she has all the good stuff in her newsletters. So I'm like 90% sure
All
that's
right.
where I heard about you guys from. I think you guys had another event earlier, a couple months ago, maybe even a month ago with farming. I wanted to attend, but I couldn't. So I'm glad to be here today. And yes, I would look forward to, seeing being more involved with you guys. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
thank you guys for having me.
same for you, Stacy Davis. Your number and color for today, last cooperative project you were involved in, and then if this is your first time, we'd love to know how you found out about us and what brought you here tonight. Can you unmute right now, Stacy?
It's not.
All good. If not, if you're there and you can hear us, go ahead and you can and you can unmute. You can put your check in and stuff in the chat, or just let us know whenever you can jump in, and we'll make some space for you. But yeah, awesome, great, and thank you both for joining us. Um, so yeah, as I mentioned, I've got a few questions just to help sort of like guide the conversation from this point on. But we like to keep it loose around here, so don't be afraid to ask questions of your own or to take the conversation other places. It's my job as the facilitator to keep us on track, so I welcome the challenge. But
Can I
I'm gonna
ask a
ask you.
question?
Hang on. Let me get this first one off first, and then go for it, Jeru. um, so I'm going to ask these questions. Would love to hear from Jessica, and then from anybody else who'd like to jump in and contribute to the discussion. This first one is going to be cooperatives are the first system of human economic and social organization. Why have so many of our species become so disconnected from that tradition?
Um, that's an easy question and a hard question. So the easy answer is basically racial capitalism, right? We've been ensconced in it for probably about 400 years. Mercantilism kind of ushered us into it. So capitalism has definitely alienated us, right? It kind of took over, right? And what happened was it allowed people who were already oppressive extractors, right, to use that to gain a leverage to give them power and resources so that they could decide what the world system would be and what the major economic system would be, and then force us all to comply with it. And so basically, they made us, they alienated us from our true economic selves, which is to do solidarity cooperative economics. That's how we've all survived. That's what, when you talk about the early hunter and gatherers, that's what hunting and gathering was. It was a group effort, right? A bunch of people went out and hunted together. And what did they do with what they caught? They shared it, right? One person didn't say, oh, that was my club, or that was my spear, or whatever. I'm taking all the meat. Of course, they didn't do that. The whole town cooked it together and they shared and ate it. When people went out gathering and gathered blueberries and nuts and stuff, they didn't say, oh, this just goes to my house, right? They divided it all up, everybody, so that's what I mean by the first systems, right? Technically, right, even Marx says, that capitalism was more efficient, and so it took off. But the honest truth is, I don't even believe that. To me is mythology. I really believe that it was a winner take all thing. The people who got stronger because they were more greedy and became that allowed them to become more powerful and to exploit us. It got to the point where we had to rent ourselves, right? Rent our labor, rent ourselves out to them because they had hoarded and stolen all the resources. And they just got greedier and greedier and kept passing it on and kept creating systems that benefited them. And then they created all these mythologies about why it should benefit them and why they should be able to get all the spoils, as if they deserved it, right? So they created a myth of meritocracy. They created all these other myths. And then were able to perpetuate it because they had the power, the economic power that gave them the social power, gave them the physical military might. And so they've been able to perpetuate the system through their exploitation, etc. However, I do also argue that even under this capitalist exploitative system, we have always still continued to do mutual aid, barter, what I call everyday acts of economic solidarity. We just don't think, right? We don't label them that, right? We've got modernity has gotten us so that we're, even the language, right? Economics is considered something that only certain trained people do or know or can study or can understand, right? And the rest of us can't even understand it. But that's not even true, right? we're all economists. We all make economic decisions every day. We all budget and trade and decide what to do with what we have and try to make more of it, right? And so again, between the language as well as the actual physicality of who has what resources, we've been alienated from our own selves and from even recognizing the ways that as human beings we actually do things to help each other and so that we can all survive and thrive. And so for me, it's more about we need to take back the language as well as remind ourselves, right, of how we got to where we are here in the beginning of the 20th century or the first quarter of the 21st century, and then remind ourselves that we can also get out of it, because we still are social beings who try normally, under normal circumstances, try to help each other. And actually we can see it, right? Especially during crises, we actually use more mutual aid and more cooperation because we're trying to survive and help each other survive. And we realize that helping ourselves survive, or the only way that we can survive ourselves, is if we help other people survive. And so if you look, there's actually been some studies that show that cooperatives actually start more during crises, but they also help people to make it through a crisis better. And so all that again makes sense because in a crisis, we're not so either beholden to the prevailing system or the prevailing system is actually failing in a crisis, right? And so we're seeing that it's failed. And so we're realizing we have to take things into our own hands. The problem is when the so-called crisis is over, we don't often keep doing it. We stop doing it and we go back to the old ways. So for me, it's more about how can we train ourselves and help each other so that we can keep doing the solidarity, cooperative, mutual aid, reciprocity kind of things, whether it's good times or bad. How can we keep doing it? Because we also have research that shows that when people cooperate, especially operating in formally structured cooperative enterprises, they're actually more productive and more effective at distributing goods and wealth to a wider variety of people so that everybody can benefit.
Thank you.
But it's a big, right? It's the best kept secret, right?
Yeah.
Because the capitalists don't want us, they don't want us to think or know that. They want to keep the upper hand.
Something that when you mentioned just how, even in this capitalist system, there's still like cooperation, it made me think about, people have observed, the rich people have the free health care and they have the, shared resources and all that. It's just like, so they're cooperating amongst themselves. It's just like they're cooperating to exploit the rest of the world.
Right.
So, which is why they're so good at it. So, yeah. Anybody else want to speak to that first question? You could ask that question now if you wanted to, J. Rue.
Yeah, actually, I think in a lot of ways, Dr. Gordon Nembhard, you already spoke to my question. One of the things that struck me the most in this preface was when you speak about kind of this next or this like fourth wave of the cooperative movement and how the challenges and struggles we face at this particular time are not necessarily unprecedented, but it's just getting back to a level where we won't be able to survive unless we start to work together again. So in a lot of ways, you already spoke to it there at the tail end. But I would be curious if there was anything else you were thinking about or wanted to add around that fourth wave. I think that's the fourth question is coming. Oh, well, never mind then. I will listen patiently.
I can say a little bit more. That thanks
go
for
for
that
it.
question, and thanks for reminding us of something I said in the preface. And I really meant it, and it's actually what my next book. I am starting to write another book. It's sort of where my next book is starting with, right? That we're in all these crises. How can we get out of it? We can get out of them by remembering all the different ways that especially Black people, but also people of color in general, women, right, have survived in ways that reflects our humanity, right? So not surviving by jumping on other people's back or pulling other people down, but surviving by pooling our resources, working with other people, right? And I honestly believe we can solve our environmental issues as well as our racial and gender and other justice issues if we really embrace this kind of economic system. Because if we embrace it at the economic level, then there's no reason why we can't, right, embrace this kind of justice and liberation at every level. Because to me, it's the economic extraction and oppression that keeps us from achieving all the other justices. And so if we can change the way we relate to each other economically, right, and stop thinking in this scarcity model, right? The model we're in right now has us thinking about scarcity, that there's a set pie, and that we have to fight over those crumbs and the pieces of the pie. That if we don't, that we can't, right? Everybody can't win, right? I hate that notion that, right, that we all can't be prosperous. So we have to get out of that mode of thinking. We have to start thinking about this mode of abundance, right? Caring, generosity, and abundance, because that's what's going to get us to a better stage, to a next stage. That's what's going to save us from where we are right now. And we have models of how people have used economic structures that are caring, that are just, that are not exploitative, right? So we need to both study the models that do exist, study what people did before, tell the stories, right? And then also learn the lessons so that we can do it more and better, And so for me, that's where I want us to be. And I feel like, and I was trying to do the book, when I first started writing the book, I actually wanted to write a director. I wanted to find every single Black co-op that existed in the United States and have some kind of information about it. And early on, I realized that was impossible, especially once I found out how many, right, Black co-ops there were and how many efforts there were. That was impossible. But I also realized it wasn't necessary. What was necessary was to show as many examples of how they worked, to talk about the lessons learned, and to kind of analyze what was happening. So I think we talked about this when we did the book club before, but the first couple chapters are very much chronology, right? And then I went into themes, right? The role of women, rural versus urban, the importance of education, that kind of thing, because I also realized I couldn't just tell the story as a chronology, because it was also a story about movement building, right? And about leadership and changing mindsets and women's roles. It was about the role, how important it is for us to learn and talk to each other, tell our stories, learn together, especially because of the times that we're in and the systems that we're under. If we don't learn together, we're never going to be able to move forward. And if we don't understand that we have these legacies that we can build on, right, we're just going to keep reinventing the wheel instead of moving further. So I'm hoping, I hope that was part of what I hoped with this book. And then I'm hoping with the next book to write a very hopeful, optimistic book to show about how we can, about how we can do this, not proving that we've done it before, which is sort of what collective courage was. Now I want to show that the principles, values, practices that we need for the rest of the 21st century. We already have them. We just need to do them. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like I'm not being very articulate, but that's
Oh,
what
no, you're making all kinds
that's where I am.
you're making all
Thanks.
kinds of sense. And I guess also to answer your question, Chin, around like why I feel people have become kind of disconnected. I think in a lot of ways we have it, for lack of a better word, just beaten out of us. You know what I mean? The examples and stories, and that's why I'm definitely agree with your point, Dr. Gordon, around like we have to do more storytelling and sharing more examples of how this exists out in the world, just to show people that it's possible. Because it's pretty easy, I would say, to get put on to a lot of ideas around, things like capitalism, or even something like, hey, go out there and, start a business and amass all this wealth. And the narratives that are popular and mainstream is very individualized. And so when those are made popular, when those are made mainstream, it just continues to disconnect us. And what you were speaking to just kind of reminded me of, that innate generosity that's linked in all of us. Like I think about little kids, and how they're, just very naturally sharers and gifters. They're very like reciprocal, and they're also very forgiving. So yeah, definitely see that just being, or I guess like just the importance of sharing the history there. Definitely grateful to my pops for putting me on to a lot of that history and kind of giving me a platform. So
those last 2 points that Jeru and Jessica raised up also kind of take us into the next question. Um, uh, how do you build a culture of co-op? And actually, I'm going to correct myself. How do we rebuild cultures of cooperation that can support cooperative organizations and institutions? What are examples of cultural tools that can support the development of cooperative cultures?
I would love to hear from other people, but I will just say that what I learned from the research I did, it's really about those study circles and learning together. I said it from the very beginning of when I put this book out that, right, most of the co-ops I found anything about, I found that if I knew anything about how they started, about 99% of the co-ops that I found started with a study group. And I keep thinking about that, so it's years now that I discovered that, what does that mean, or why is it so important? And it's back to, right, how do we change the culture that we're in? We're learning together, right? And a lot of people ask me, what do you mean by a study group, right? I don't necessarily mean a formal education program, but I do mean people getting together, even like we are now, right? And talking through, trying to learn together, talking about what the issues are, what the problems are, but also talking about solutions, reading and things together, learning things together, sharing information. Because first of all, that builds trust and the kind of bonds that we need in order to do economic cooperation. It also helps us to get the information that we need. And it also helps us to understand each other and what each other's needs are, right? So that as we're building and starting to create cooperatives, we understand what kind of cooperative, what kind of cooperation, what kind of things we want to do together that would help all the people in the group, right? And being able to talk and learn together and articulate things together builds that trust, builds that ability to start to make decisions together, which is what you need to do in order to own and run something collectively. And so there's all kinds of pieces in there that matter. So figuring out just how we get, even during COVID, I said to people, even if you have to do it on the phone or on Zoom or whatever, just starting to talk to each other, right? You don't necessarily have to be in the same room. Of course, it's better if you're in the same physical space, but you don't have to be in the same room as long as you can talk together and learn together. That's a start. But also it helps us to feel comfortable telling the story, sharing the needs, right? Because if we can't articulate the need, then we can't solve the problem with the co-op if we haven't articulated the need. And if we don't talk together, right, we're not going to articulate the need. So all those pieces come together. So if you do nothing else, come together and talk together, right? Um, that's the first thing. I also have been known to rail against, kindergarten and formal education because kindergarten beats cooperation out of us. Like Jeru said, young people are generous and cooperate and whatever. And what do we do in kindergarten? We tell them, oh yeah, you have to cooperate when you play, right? The non-essential, non-consequential stuff. But when you get to the real stuff, the academics, the learning how to read and write, whatever, you got to do that on your own.
No
You've got to just sit
cheating.
quietly, listen to the teacher, right? If you talk to somebody else by first grade, if you consult with someone else, that's cheating.
Yeah.
And you get a zero, you fail, you get sent home, you get expelled, right? So how do then we expect by high school and as adults, how do we expect people to then cooperate if they've spent years being punished for cooperating? Or cooperation was only when you play, when it didn't really matter, right? So then we take it for granted, right? So we've got to change all those attitudes. And that would help us build the culture. But, I've seen great co-ops in schools, right? Schools that use co-ops in their curriculum, after school programs, summer programs, and young people really take to co-ops well. So there's lots of ways that we could actually reintegrate cooperation and co-op activity and learning about co-ops, learning by doing, because that's also another thing we do really well is learn by doing. And that's another reason why doing a co-op as part of a learning journey is really effective also, because we do learn well by doing and talking about it and reflecting on it and that kind of thing. And if we can do that with young people in schools, if we can do it with adult education, I think that makes a big difference. And I do have a section that part where I talk about Father McKnight. That was one of the things he really also believed. He believed in adult education and that we had to re-educate ourselves in order to to re-embrace cooperatives. But that it was really that even that adult education toward cooperative economics could be life-changing for people. And I certainly have found that in my new research on cooperatives of incarcerated people. Um, that's what I found in the interviews I did of previously incarcerated men in Puerto Rico who had been in a co-op while they were incarcerated. And that's what they really want. That's what they spent the hours talking to me about, was how they changed as a human being, how their life, their attitude, their world changed because they decided to start the co-op and be in the co-op and work with other people, um, not just to have a livelihood and to give money back to their families, but because they wanted that kind of camaraderie and they wanted to be in a business that gave back to people, or what they called was in the service of people, and what a difference that made in their lives, and that they finally had a chance to be and learn that and to do and to behave in the world that way, um, even though they were in prison behind bars and in some of the worst conditions of their lives, right? But they were able to do this co-op, and what a difference it made in all aspects of their life. That actually is what inspired me for this new book, because I was thinking, if you can take people who are caged in the worst conditions, the men I interviewed were in jail they had 99 plus year sentences. But once they joined the co-op, they were actually out in like 8 years, 10 years, because the co-op had so changed their lives, and they were able to convince other people and that they really were changed.
Yeah.
And I was trying to talk to them. My questions were about the economics, right? I kept saying, oh, well, did you make more money? How much money did you send home? Was it more money than the slave wages they give you? And one guy finally said to me, you know what? Yeah, the money was fine, but that's not what the story is. The story is
Yeah.
that we became better human beings, and that we felt better about ourselves. We related to other people better. We were involved in a business that allowed us to be human beings, even though in every other aspect of our world in the prison, we were not human beings.
Man. The power of education, man. That's profound. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I was going to pick up on that theme as well. So thank you for bringing up the way that acculturation into our meritocratic and racially capitalistic society starts in kindergarten and then is magnified up through the grades. So I'll speak a little bit from my experience as a classroom teacher at the middle school level, and then I hope we still have Stefan on because he said he had some classroom teaching experience too. So I'd like to hear what his experience is. It's a dreadful situation. By the time I got students at the middle school level, I tried to instill a sense of cooperative learning together, just plain, well, the whole idea of thinking, group thinking is such a alien concept. And, so competition and meritocracy is deeply embedded from the first grade, definitely on up through the 12th grade. And we need some solutions on how to change that, because that is how the acculturation is getting started and is being intensified over the years. So I hope maybe Stefan has some observations too.
Looks like he's gone, I'm afraid. I don't know what happened.
Andrea, you did also mention just like having experience in book studies and now, being part of a academic research. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit as well.
I'm not sure that I have a lot to offer, although I do think that, the book study and some of the things that I've been involved in, one of the things I spent a lot of time was advocating for community-based media. And it allowed me to be exposed to some different ideas and different, people, and seeing some other things that I guess I just really want to say that just having that, maybe that initial spark, and then finding people who may be in some ways like-minded, but also kind of bringing you along in your understanding and development, of the world. Um, I could definitely see that. And as you all have been talking about it, I've just been kind of running through the younger folks in my own family, and thinking how they are educated, and the values that they're shown, and how that may take them away from these sort of cooperative activities in certain ways. But when there's a crisis, we behave that way. And, I'm looking at like, well, that's not a very efficient way, of doing it. Whereas if you were practicing that all the time, it would, I think, result in fewer crises, and things would be more effective and efficient. So,
Absolutely. That's what I think.
Anybody else want to jump in on that on this question before we move on to the next one? Nas, could you tap the arrow to the side real quick just so I can see who else is on the call? Okay, yeah, I think I can see everybody. Cool. Yeah, keep it there. Yeah, keep it there because I don't need to see the room. But yeah, all right, yeah. So let's go and get into our third question. Are there, and I'm going to correct myself again here, are there any unique challenges or opportunities to building cooperative cultures and institutions in the age of digital dominance and surveillance capitalism?
Yes.
Do you care to elaborate?
Um, the first thing is, as we said, our whole existing racial capitalist system is a problem, and it gets in the way, and it also tries to thwart if we don't do things under the radar or small enough. If we get too big, they do get in the way. And there's been, experiences in the past with actual, white supremacist, capitalist violence against co-ops, Black co-ops especially,
Yeah.
but even other co-ops. So we do have to worry. And in this, the current period, even though, some conservatives and some business people actually don't, they just see co-ops as another kind of private enterprise, and they're not that upset about it unless we start talking about it as being more liberatory and whatever.
Mm,
So we have this kind of conundrum, right? Where in some ways it is kind of a bipartisan, anybody could like a co-op, but if you try to do too much with it, or have too many of them, or take over whole markets with it, then then that's a problem. So there's that kind of thing about how do we get big without being a target? And if we stay small, how do we stay small but still be effective? So I think that's a challenge in general. Another general challenge is that sort of goes with the education piece, but learning how to embrace conflict and how to come to joint decisions. And right, that's also another thing that we're not good at, right? Most of us are conflict averse. I think we're actually conflict averse because capitalism is so traumatizing. We're already traumatized and so competitive in the world we live in that we're exhausted, right? But actually, conflict doesn't have to be bad. I've been studying conflict transformation, and they're teaching us that one, conflict is inevitable, but also we should embrace conflict as a way to get us to higher ground, as a way to make sure everybody's voicing their concerns, worries, that we're getting to the root of things and moving beyond it in a way that we're bringing everybody with us, right? And so we do have to make sure that we're starting to learn those strategies, right? Nonviolent talk, conflict transformation, right? How to come to consensus, how to work out when there are differences, how to use those differences to make us stronger, right? We've got to pay attention to all that. And then, the digital age is another a different kind of challenge. How should I put this? Cooperatives, doing cooperative development is a lot like organizing. It's about relationship building. That's why the study groups are so important. But being in a digital age doesn't have to mean that we don't communicate. It does mean that we have to figure out ways to effectively communicate digitally and not to lose sight of the fact that we still, as human beings, need that human contact, right? So we need to figure out how to embrace and use the digital technologies to our advantage, but not lose the fact that as human beings, we still need and want and should be in physical contact with each other. And right. And do, so we don't want, like for doctors, right? They need to figure out how do you still have a bedside manner and still do things like touch people's forehead and hold people's hand or whatever, but still you can use all this new technology and digital stuff to do this, to do a bunch of other stuff, right? But if we're not in control of it, and that's again where economic cooperation, doing cooperative ownership, we need to be in control of the technology so that we can use it in the way that's right for us as human beings. Again, when technology is used for profit maximizing and for the greedy to get more money, then it's going to be a problem. But if we, the people who are trying to do solidarity cooperative economics, are controlling the technology and the digitization, then I feel like we can then use our values. We can use our value system to then figure out how and when these technologies are appropriate, which ways should they be used, that kind of thing. So that again, it's for the common good. It's to help all of us to make sure what we're doing, we can do it better and whatever, but we're not losing our humanity to it. I guess what I'm saying is in the end, it's all about us making sure we have the right values and the power, and that we can use our power, connect it with the right values to then perpetuate our humanness rather than greediness or whatever the other exploitative things are out there. But it's a challenge because again, we live in a world that doesn't reward us thinking that way, right? It makes us all either feel stupid or simple or short-sighted when we're actually the ones who are long-sighted and deep thinkers, but we're made to feel like we're not adequate or we're not thinking right or we're being silly. So we've got to figure out how to stay strong in our beliefs and stay united around the humane, supportive values, caring values that we know are what keeps human beings surviving.
Yeah. I'm gonna jump in with my own answer to that question in a second, but I would love to hear from some others in the room, maybe some folks who we haven't heard from yet. Maybe Stacy, maybe Miss Deidre, maybe Elita.
Well, I'm still learning a lot with my journey. I guess I'm trying to build a co-op. It is connected to a housing project, Twin Hills off 38th and Keystone, and I own a plot of land that over the past 2 years I've been trying to slowly renovate it into community garden / space.
Nice.
The idea is to get kids, families outside to do all these things, learn, educate each other, be around each other, but make it like a safe spot, non-pressure, where you don't have to garden. We're trying to learn. There's different ways to garden. You can touch, we can meet, we can, and I have experienced some of the challenges with the community where it's like at first, like the kids would come over, we'd build something, and 5 minutes later it'd be burnt down. And I'm like, wait a second. So we're dealing with these layers of just hurt and learning how to share with each other. And now I was just there yesterday and we're waving to each other and we're building this community dynamic. And I'm going to get your book as soon as we leave here. I'm ordering it and I'm going to read, I'm going to learn. So I'm here learning. So this is just like, I'm happy I'm here and I'm learning. So I'm not going to say much because I'm learning, but taking notes. So I'm gonna go back on mute now.
You already said a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, yeah, Stacy, I saw you came off mute as well. And while we've got you, we'd also love to hear your number and color for the day, the last cooperative project you were involved in, and just,
Okay,
and
that's a
then,
lot.
okay, yeah, we'll start there. We'll start there.
Well,
Yeah.
I am I'm a practicing attorney. I just saw the lecture and it was of interest to me in terms of the last project. When I think of cooperations, I think of like what Ms. Flowers is involved in, cooperative gardening and things like that. I kind of have helped in the past with the Center for Wellness of Urban Women's Garden. And so it's open to the community and people can come in and help plant things or whatnot. So I'm here to learn as well. And Dr. Gordon's, I'm going to be reading your book, getting your book.
Yeah.
And so this talk has kind of broadened my knowledge base in terms of, I mean, when I think of the Black community, and historically, I feel like we've been cooperative with one another, but times things have changed. I think some of that is that, we've moved out to other areas in the past. Back in the 60s, you lived in the neighborhood with your teachers, your pastors, and your lawyers, that everybody lived together. And so people got to, learn from one another. And like you said, from your experience growing up, there was a tight knit community. Everybody knew everybody's children. People could speak to other people's children. So this is really kind of eye-opening and thought-provoking in terms of what we can do in the future. With your last question, I think you had posed, what are the challenges and advantages in a digital age? And I see more advantages than challenges. It's like, just like now, what are we doing now? You're educating folks. I wasn't familiar with your book, and so I've learned something new, and I'll be spreading that. And so, we can reach thousands of people. I was just thinking back with the election. I don't know if anybody, well, a lot of you all are men, but the Win with Black Women, that there were Zoom meetings weekly that were talking about, the things that were going on in the community and things like that. And we reached thousands of people and raised thousands of dollars for Kamala Harris. So I see the digital age. I see everything coming to seeing it more as an advantage than a disadvantage. I know what you were saying, Dr. Gordon, about maintaining our humanity and so on and so forth. But I feel like just even reaching out to the community like this, I mean, I think we need to do more of this. I just got an email from the Kheprw Institute. So, things like that. So that's my 2 cents.
And if today were a number and color for you, what would they be?
My number and color, 44. Did I have that? I missed that whole part. I came in a little late.
No, that's great. Yeah.
My favorite color is pink. So.
You said purple?
Pink.
Pink. Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining and thank you for speaking. Yeah. And I wanted to jump in on this. I did want to jump in on this piece real quick before we move to the next question. I love the piece that you raised up, Stacy, about Stacy, you raised this up, and Jessica, you raised this up just about like the importance of like human connection. And I also see that as both like, a challenge and an obstacle in that, because, on one hand, we have the opportunity to interface with people in real time from geographic locations in a way that we've never been able to in human history. Like we wouldn't be having this conversation without Zoom, so that's an opportunity. But on the other hand, people stay in their houses more. They don't come out as much. They're building communities that are like connected digitally, but not physically connected. And that creates a different type of power that I think that not everybody is used to like having. So I think that's one thing. I also think, Jessica, you raised the point around like, when we get too big, we become a target. And I think like adapting to being targeted is definitely something that we have to figure out because like, now with virality and the internet and all these different cameras and microphones that we got in all our devices, it doesn't matter how big you are, they're going to see you. You know, somebody's going to see you, you know, so like everything's hyper visible these days. So that's definitely something. And then just the last thing is like, you know, the internet has become a huge part of the way that people educate themselves and each other. And so like, you know, obviously there's an opportunity there to use that as a platform for this more cooperative education. But then obviously there are a lot of forces on the internet right now that are using it quite effectively to educate people in the opposite direction. So yeah, I just wanted to share that before we move on to this next question. But
Mhm.
so next question is, um, and this is on this fourth wave of cooperative development that we've talked about a little bit. You know, what is needed to take this fourth wave of cooperative development to the next level? What opportunities do we have right now to build sustainability for the movement? You know, what lessons can we learn from the first waves in the 1880s, 1930s, and 1960s? So maybe a bit of a big one, but you know, just do your best.
I was going to see if anyone else wanted to answer that first.
Please.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Oh God. Bless you all. Well, just drawing from the 60s, we know, we've had the civil rights movement, and um, there was strength in numbers. We marched together. We had meetings in churches together. We had meetings in people's homes together. We had meals together. Um, and of course, we know we were also targets. I think there's just a basic reality that whenever you try to come together to do anything and you're going against the norm, or what we call the capitalist beast or the racist regime, whatever, you're going to be targeted. But there's strength in numbers, and I think we've had emotional support from one another as well as financial support. um, I can't speak to the 1890s anymore. I mean, from the Black community, we've always kind of had to stick together, and we've gotten away from that, and gotten away from our, supporting our neighbors and things as time has changed. And I think we need to go back to that. How many of us really even know our neighbors? I mean, right
Yeah.
now, sitting in my house, I know their faces. We smile, but we don't get involved with one another. And I think some of that is, I think like she said, we were talking about a culture of fear. I think there's a culture of fear, not wanting anybody to be in our business. We have to develop a way of trusting one another. And I don't know. I mean, it's a huge problem. But I think forums like this, what we're doing now, I think helps to create that little by little. So that's my 2 cents.
Miss Deidre, if you're available to jump in, I'd love to hear from you on this one as another OG in the space. And if Miss Deidre can't come to the microphone, Imhotep, I think you'd be good to answer this one.
I really don't have a lot more to add. I think what we're doing is a testimony to how you bring the fourth way into being. I think the points that Jessica spoke to earlier around the challenge of visibility and scale and small, and how those challenges impact it. But I also think the piece she raised up about the brothers in prison, and how the most important piece of it was how it changed how they saw themselves and their relationship with each other. A relationship economy model where people are primary, not secondary. And I do see it actually emerging, coming out of the ground. Even, I think I'll stop there. What we're doing is working. I think we should continue to be resilient and keep the eyes on our relation with each other, and redefine what wealth is. And
Yeah.
the piece about the indigenous, who Jessica also talked about earlier, talked about the most courageous act is an act of generosity. That's a worldview, a perspective of what it means to be human in a different kind of way. And the more we model that and practice that, I think we'll see more of it. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Em. So I'm very optimistic because I already see a lot of stuff happening. There's so many Black co-op organizations going on, so many co-op study groups starting. So we definitely, that's why it looks like we're in this fourth wave, this fourth prolific period. I think between, in some ways it started after or during the Occupy movement, because those young people in Occupy were realizing they needed to get back, or they were cooperating in order to survive, in order to do Occupy. And they were starting to think about, capitalism is the enemy, so what else can we do? Then we had the housing crisis and the banking crisis, when in 07, 08, 09, people were really realizing how capitalism is failing them, right? And why are they trying so hard, right, to keep capitalism going when it's just, the big banks and the rich people get bailed out and the rest of us get left behind. Then with COVID, I think people started realizing their jobs weren't protecting them, right? In fact, right, most low-income Black and brown people were considered frontliners and indispensable jobs that didn't deserve protection and that kind of thing. So I think more and more people started realizing that, the current system was not one that they needed to be loyal to. But also at the same time, all these different crises meant that we had to go back to what we always do, which is helping each other, right? So there were more mutual aid societies, more urban gardening, more even conversions. We actually, during COVID, we found that worker-owned companies were actually more resilient during these kind of bad times because they could pivot easier. They were more flexible without having to either let people go or whatever, and there were ways for them to keep going. So I think on all the different levels, issues with gentrification and affordable housing now, people are realizing housing co-ops are a way to protect housing, community land trusts are a way to stop speculation on land, things like that. So I feel like we're at this moment where all the problems keep leading us back to, solidarity cooperative solutions. And in case I didn't explain it before, I think it's probably the last 5 or 10 years I've started talking about solidarity cooperation, not just cooperatives, not just cooperation, because unfortunately there are still some co-ops in the co-op movement, like some of the large agricultural co-ops and some other big co-ops that aren't really solidarity. They actually are just another way to kind of make it in capitalism. And
Yeah.
so I focus on the co-ops that really want solidarity, meaning helping other people for the common good, doing economics to care and to care for human beings and to care for the planet and to be non-extractive, that kind of thing. And so I add the principles and practices and values of solidarity economics with economic cooperation. And so I usually try to say solidarity cooperation or solidarity cooperatives or economic and solidarity, right? Cooperative and economic solidarity, to make sure I'm talking about the values-based work, the human-centered work, the work that's about the common good. What are we doing for the common good to make sure all of us prosper? And more people I see are starting to talk about that, think about that, try to do things. As I said, in the co-op movement, the fastest growing co-ops are worker co-ops and food co-ops, especially food co-ops among Black and Latin people, which is really interesting to me. So that's the food sovereignty issues, right? Using co-ops for that, worker co-ops, using co-ops to solve some of the labor issues and to make, as I said, more resilient, more productive, more humane economic structures for people to work in, that kind of thing. So I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. Oh, so the way, right. So for me, I just keep hearing and learning more and more about these things that are happening, both in small pockets, but also more interconnections, more organizations happening. There's now a Black National Association of Black Cooperators. There's been annual Black Co-op Agenda conferences. So we're getting more, every time I go to a co-op conference now, remember I told you in the early days, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was like the only one, or maybe there was one or two other people. Now, the last 3 co-op conferences I was at least half the people were people of color, maybe more. Also, young people. In the old days, it was old white guys who were in the co-op movement, and now there's all these young, vibrant, active young people coming to these conferences and doing things. So, a lot has been moving, changing, and growing. So, I feel very excited and confident about what's happening. I also just want to say, about the 1880s is actually a similar time in terms of backlash period to now. So the 1880s was when the Reconstruction was ended, right? It's when the Ku
Mm.
Klux Klan started, the Jim Crow laws started, et cetera. And so we hear mostly about how repressive a period that was. There was also some economic downturn, but it was also a period when the labor movement and the co-op movement, integrationist movement, were all working together. All the organizations are pretty much labor organizations and doing co-op development and also pushing for women's rights and integration and that kind of thing. So it was a populist movement time, right? So looking at the small farmer and small farmers and farm workers coming together in the same organization. And so you have the Young Negro, sorry, not the Young Negroes Cooperative, you have the Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union, which is a populist political party. It's a union, a labor union. It's a coalition of Black landowners and Black landless farm workers. And it's a co-op development organization. So it was starting co-ops, farm co-ops, equipment co-ops, credit unions, though they didn't have credit unions in those, so they called them credit exchanges, co-op stores. They were trying to work with the larger Southern Farmers National Alliance, but with that group was a little bit racist, so they had to do mostly their own stuff. But in some states, they actually were able to use the same co-op stores and things. So it was an interesting period of time. So at the same time, we had this huge repression. We also had some of the most progressive stuff happening. And to this day, my understanding is that the Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union is the largest Black organization in US history.
Whoa.
And it was, as I said, a union, a
Period.
co-op developer, a progressive political party. So it's really quite amazing and happening, as I said, at the same time. This is when Jim Crow is starting, segregation in the South, the lynchings are starting, the Ku Klux Klan is on the rise. And right after that, by the early 1900s, the co-op movement and the labor movement have separated. It's no longer even safe for the labor movement to talk about co-ops. The co-op movement kind of is, goes downhill a little bit. All the other movements separate out, right? The women's rights stuff just moved toward voting rights that they get in the 1920s. The integrationist movement is kind of dying to be revived later on. But the 1880s is a really interesting time. And, we're politically in the same position now with the backlash again. We might not have apartheid and Jim Crow yet, but, we've got a white supremacist, misogynist, fascist in the government. And so you would think it would be a ripe time for more of the kind of activity that we saw in the 1880s, even though, again, it wasn't something that people talked about that much, right? You have to really look carefully into that history to realize that was going on at the same time that this other repressive stuff was happening.
Yeah. All right. So everybody do your brush up on the 1880s as you're preparing for today. Um, and real quick before we move into the last question, that distinction between solidarity co-ops and other types of co-ops, that is so big to me because like I feel like as I've been learning about co-ops, I've always been like, there's a gap here somewhere between the co-ops that, you know, it's like almost like you said, co-ops as an economic model, just another way to like get by in capitalism versus like co-ops as a cultural model, like for community building. And so I think that distinction of solidarity co-ops like really speaks to like what that difference is. You know, it's not just about how do you build up your community, it's how do you build up your community in a way that feeds other communities' abilities to build themselves up as well. So, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, last question, and you know, obviously, all of the questions have. Ooh, nice. All of the questions have been for everybody, but this one is the most for everybody. So, I want to hear answers from as many people as possible on this one as we wrap up here. But, and I think we've already talked to this a little bit, but you know, now we can elaborate. Um, how can people who are new to the idea of cooperatives participate in cooperative organizing? Is joining a co-op the only option? We know that the answer is no, so everybody can talk about why the answer is no. Let's see. I think I'm gonna pick on you again, Elita.
That's fine. Um, so at first, I've never been a part of, besides church when I was younger, I was really heavy into that. I never been a part of like a community. Sob story, both my parents died when I was younger, so it was just me and my kids. My kids are older now, and I've always been a caregiver. I just long to be a part of something, I guess. And so jumping into it wasn't a problem for me. When I bought the land, it was initially just to grow. I was tired of renting places and having my plants, go when I go. And it was an investment for my kids, but it was natural for me to invite anyone that wanted to come along. Um, Finding that right group, that is difficult because like you're talking about, you have to find people, you have to talk and make sure that you guys are on the same page and make sure that you guys want the same things out of life. Is the challenge for me. My personal challenge in coming into this is I would live at that piece of land 24 hours a day and live off the land and just see what happens and build. It's just maintaining that 8 to 5, 40 hours a week, still trying to learn, still trying to give up and not looking like a barefooted crazy lady. You know what I mean, to the world. So planning, preparation, reading your book. So we're not, like you said, reinventing the wheel, learning what worked and didn't work in the past, including the future and what we can expect with technology, including that when we do build. So when we do build, it is on a rock. So that's what I'm experiencing now in my journey. Being here just really solidified that I do need to be connected with people who know more than me, but also people are still trying to learn like me. And then just knowledge of the past, just because I'm not familiar with it. Like I had no idea how deep the work that was put in the past. So I'm excited to learn more about that. So can't wait to read your book.
Sounds great. And talk to people. Sounds like you
Yes.
should connect more with Kheprw.
I have no problem talking. I need to read. I need to plan. I need to wait. Because before I used to tell people, I'm tired of talking. We know what's wrong. We know what the problem. Now we just need to do. And now it's like, before we do, let's plan and make sure we're doing it right and make sure we all have that same picture of what we're building. So thank you for instilling that in me today.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for coming and thanks for doing what you do. I'm so excited that you've got that land and that you're offering it to the community.
Yeah. I think I want to pass this one over to Khalid as well. You understand what the question is? Yeah, so maybe let's say, so I guess like, you know, if you're looking for opportunities to collaborate with people, to work on group projects, not just in school, but elsewhere, you know, where do you look? How do you find, opportunities to do that and people that you can build with?
Well, if you have a community like Kheprw, that's very easy. Or online, definitely, because there's people all around the world that have electronics. Um, and what type of people? Mm, Well, I don't really know. Wait, okay, I guess I see what you mean. Uh, smart people? I don't really know. What type? Like people that do certain things that can help you. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, man. That's like, when you say a community like Kepra, like what is it about Kepra that
Oh,
makes it?
there's just a bunch of people that do a whole lot of things. Like it's like everybody does something that they're good at. So we're all like kind of good at everything. Like that. Like for example, Russell, he's the tech person. Um, like for example, Russell, he's the tech person. Um, who else? Um, like Agila, she's good with her cooks, like cooking skills, things like that. Just everybody has their own specialty. So I guess like
Like a diversity skill.
yes.
And then for the next session, will it focus on a part of the book? And is this session recorded? Yes, Andrea, this session is recorded. A lot of our conversation has been focused on the preface of the 10th anniversary, which is the preface of the 10th anniversary edition, which is only in the 10th anniversary edition. And then our next session, which will be 2 weeks from now, will go over the introduction. So, yeah, we'll be getting started on that in on the 28th. 28th of June, yeah. You got a question now? You got want to add something else? Yeah, man, come on up here.
Hey, tech guy here. Hey y'all. Just wanted to ask, do you find yourself seeing more merit in transitioning existing models to cooperative models, or are you more aligned with creating new models to replace the existing? And also, is this a case by case basis, and is it not a one size fits all? And thank you.
Good question.
Great question. You kind of answered it yourself. Um, I think both and. So I think it is case by case. There's something to be said about transitioning existing businesses. The two main things quickly are that they are existing, right? So they already have a business plan that's working, right? They already have people that know what they're doing and know how to do it, right? So then if you can transition to making sure now people learn also how to be a social organization, not just a business, right? And how to work together and have multiple owners who are making decisions together. It's still a lot of education and it takes time to help people transition, right? Because they're used to having, a manager tell them what to do or an owner saying we have to make more money or whatever. And so, right. So there are some pitfalls, but transitioning is a great strategy, especially if you have an owner who's ready to hand it over and who's interested in
Mm.
handing it over to their workers. The other what's the word? Another motivation is that there's actually some great tax breaks and stuff for sole proprietors who transition to worker ownership. So there's that kind of motivation, especially for a retiring owner who doesn't know what to do with their business or doesn't have anyone to leave it to. But also some owners who aren't retiring actually are happy to just become a worker owner with their other employees and change the way they operate in the business. However, it can be difficult sometimes to change that mindset and to change the culture into a more democratic workplace, uh, to more collective, collaborative. And so sometimes if you don't do it carefully, right, you can transition, but not really transition well or not really. I've seen some times where you transition, but you don't really educate or talk to the workers enough. So you either lose them or they end up just kind of reproducing the sole proprietor hierarchical ownership that they had before they transitioned. And so sometimes it doesn't work. Also, I've heard people critique the transition model because technically the transition model has the workers buying the company from the sole proprietor or the original owners. And some of us feel like the workers already shouldn't have to buy it. The owner should be giving it to them because technically employees never are paid as much as they're worth, right? They're always, right?
Ooh,
The
yeah.
owner is always getting more worth out of the employee than what they're paying. And so to have the employee both be exploited while they were a worker and then exploited because they have to pay the owner more when they already were, were kind of
Kinda
paying. So
yikes.
it gets complicated if you want to get into the theory of the, right? But
Yeah.
I believe we can get around that. We can figure out ways. And in some of the models, the workers don't really end up having to pay that much out of their pocket. There's loans and refinancing and things, and they can use what the business is worth to buy their ownership. And so, so it doesn't have to be a totally extractive process. But I do think when we're thinking about those transitioning, we need to make sure it's working. It's going to work for the workers and that the workers get the right compensation and the right training to make it work. Starting from scratch is harder from a business point of view because you have to now create a really good business plan. You have to have a good business that can at least make enough surplus to stay in business, right? And you've got to train people both on how to run the business as well as how to be a co-op. On the other hand, it is kind of a nice, you've got a blank slate, right? So you get to create the culture from the beginning. You don't have to retrain people about how to be worker owners and that kind of thing. So, a startup has other kinds of benefits in that sense that you can start people from scratch, do all the training you really need to do. These days, there's actually a lot of co-op loan funds and grants for co-op development. Probably not as much as we need, but a lot more than there used to be. So it's actually feasible to come up with an idea for a co-op, for a startup, and to try to find the financing and the money and whatever from co-op friendly places and to do the kind of training that's needed. There's a lot, as I said, a lot of groups doing co-op development. So there's a lot of different great co-op curriculum out of there. So it really is kind of case by case. You would have to see if you have a reason, if you've got a company that has a reason to transition, then yes, it can work. You just have to make sure to address all the potential pitfalls. And then if you've got a group of people who want to start a co-op, that's very viable as well. So again, I think the biggest issue is to be planful. I think Alita, you were saying it, right? Put in, let's study together, have plans, right? Be planful about how we do it and make sure. To me, the biggest thing is you do have to have a good business plan. You have to have something that's going to work for what it is you're doing the business for, but you really have to pay attention to the relationship building, the people part, the social relations, and how people are going to run this non-extractive, non-exploitative, democratic organization. You have to pay as much attention to that as you do to whether, it's a viable business or not.
Did anybody else want to speak to this question of Miss Deidre? I see we got you back, and I don't know if you got a chance to answer any of the questions leading up to this, but I would love to, the last question that we've got is about, how do people get involved in building cooperatively, building collectively? So maybe if you wanted to answer that and close us out for the evening.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate the conversation. And thank you, Dr. Jessica, for speaking to non-extractive cultures intentionally, not non-extractive and valuing people's contributions, whether they're mental, emotional, physical, and holding space for each other. So that's the way, in my opinion, Chin, and all the work that Kheprw does, and I like the solidarity, an explanation of the solidarity. I wasn't clear on that prior to this conversation, so I appreciate that clarification and just trusting each other more and not being so fearful of each other. I loved the explanation of how in school you are taught not to share, not to, you are considered to be cheating. And wow, that is like a eye-opening, like opening that whole Pandora's box open, because we begin to incorporate that mindset, and it goes into every aspect of business, both, just everything that we do. We do it from that kind of more scarcity mindset. Fear. We operating out of fear instead of out of love. So I appreciate the conversation. I really do. And whatever I can do to help, I'm here. I'm open and receptive. And I see we're doing it with food, with the gardens and the CCFI, and some of the work even with housing. And we just need to continue, because it's extremely difficult and unsuccessful when we don't work together and include each other, instead of operating more as an island. I, me, my, and it's not working. It's a big, huge fail. So I appreciate the conversation very much.
Thank you, Ms. Deidre.
Thanks.
And yeah, we are over time, but well worth it. So I want to say thank you again, everybody who joined and participated in the conversation. Special thank you to Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard. We're all clapping here in the room. Everybody clap on your Zoom calls as well. Thank you, Dr. Jessica, for joining us and, lending us your perspective for a few hours. Once again, I'll just remind a few reminders and announcements as we close out. Dr. Jessica will be joining us next month at the end of July, on July 30th, here in person at the Alchemy Community Wealth Building Center, for a special discussion of the 20th anniversary, or the 10th anniversary edition of Collective Courage. So please come to that. Snag yourself, be on the lookout to snag yourself a copy of the 10th anniversary edition. And I won't make any promises, but if you come to that event, you might even be able to get it signed.
Maybe.
Yeah, so be looking out for that. If you want to know more about, all of Kheprw's work is cooperative. Ms. Deidre mentioned the Community Controlled Food Initiative, which is a co-op that was sort of founded out of the Kheprw community. So you can look up CCFI to learn a little bit more about that. Our next book study will be the 28th. Next week, we'll be having a conversation about Juneteenth and freedom and that ongoing struggle. So please join us for those. And as always, if you enjoyed this conversation, if you want to see us do more stuff like this, have more conversations with people like Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard about these, really like seminal and powerful books like Collective Courage, visit donate.kheprw.org and leave us a donation. And help us keep the work going. So, yeah. Oh, and all
Thanks,
and of
everybody.
course, shout out to the Indianapolis Recorder for allowing us to stream this to their platform, and for being our content partner with this Mumbo Jumbo series. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks. Have a good evening.
See you, Jessica.
Great
you,
seeing
Dr.
you again.
Jessica.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.